All right, worksheet 11.1b, and then a little bit of textbook work here in 11.1. So we are simplifying these expressions. When we're adding them, we can just combine like terms. When we are subtracting, or if we have a number on the outside, we do need to distribute, whether it's the number or if it's a negative or a minus, that's a -1. And we'll get to those in a second. But for questions like number 1, you simply are putting together like terms. You can basically pretend the parentheses aren't there. They don't really have any purpose there. Technically, you would be distributing a 1 and they would go away. But when you multiply by 1, nothing changes. Okay, so we're going to combine a 3a squared and a 2a squared. Okay, the only thing we can combine are like terms. They have to have the same, not just variable, but exponent on that. So an a can't go with an a squared. So these two together, just look at the coefficients, 3 and 2. That's 5a squared. A 7a and a -5a or a -5a is +2, so you write plus 2a. -5 plus 1 is -4, so you write -4. Okay, number 2, we got to be careful here. Now it is a plus, so we can just combine everything. But things are a little bit out of order, so you can only put the b squared with another b squared and the b with a b. So when you do -28 and 11, that's -17b squared. And then with the b's, it's 39 minus 13. That's +26, so I write plus 26b. Number 3, this is going to be 2 steps. This first part's not going to change, but I have to distribute a -3. So it's going to be a -15c squared and then -21. So out of all of that, I've only got the squareds to combine here. So I have a 9 and a -15. That's a -6c squared. The rest, the 10c and the 21, don't have anything to combine with. So they're just going to come down to our answer. So -10c -21. Similar over here, but we have to distribute the negative. I'm just going to put it underneath. It's a -3d squared and a -3. So I have a 1d squared and a -3. So that's a total of -2d squared. This is my only 2d, so it's going to stay. It's the only term here that has a d. And then the -3 also doesn't have anything to combine with, so that's in my final answer. Number 5, it's plus. There's nothing to distribute, so just combine your like terms. This is the only e to the third, so it's just going to stay. This is the only e to the second, so it's just going to stay. These e's go together. It's a 7 minus 24, or 7 plus -24, which is -17. All right, here it's a minus 3x to the third. You're distributing. It's a minus x squared, and this is a negative times a negative, so it becomes a +7. So when you have a minus, it basically just goes inside and changes all the signs. These were positive, they became negative. This was negative, it became positive. Now start combining. So x to the thirds, we have a 6 and a -3, so that's 3x to the third. Before I get to the x, I'm going to go x squared, so this is in order. That's the only x squared, so it's going to be -x squared. I have an x, don't have another x to combine it with, so it's just a positive 4x. And I have a 15 and a 7 to put together. It's positive 22. Number 7, just combining like terms because it's a plus. This is a 1x to the third and a 2x to the third, so it's 3x to the third. And the x squareds will go together, 16 and a -3, so positive 13x squared. Here it is a plus, so nothing's going to change. Start combining. This is the only y squared, so it stays. -9y, -5y, that's -14y. Whole number is -5 plus 1 is -4. All right, number 9. Again, it's a plus. Nothing needs to change. Just combine. -3 and 1 is -2. This is the only w term, so -w. This is the only whole number term, so -12 stays. Over here now, minus does need to get distributed, so it becomes a -12g to the third and becomes a -2g to the second. So My thirds, I have a 10 and a negative 12, so that's negative 2g to the third. This is the only squared. This is my only g, and this is my only whole number. So they're just going to stay. It should be a 22, not 122. All right, I'm bringing a separate sheet of paper here for number 11. So for 11 and 12 here, we have to do some simplifying, and then we've got an equation because all of this is going to equal 0, and we'll be able to solve that equation. And we'll take a look at what we've got left over, but if we have something with an x squared and an x, we'll have to use that quadratic formula. So let's start with 11. First of all, this has to get distributed, so it's going to be a negative 3x squared. This changes to a negative 2x, and this changes to a positive 24. That's from multiplying by negative 1, which just changes the sign. Then I got to start combining, and I'll do that down here. So 4x squared and negative 3x squared, that's a 1x squared. I've got a negative 5x and a negative 2x, that's a negative 7x. And I've got a negative 12 and a positive 24, that's a positive 12. All right, from here now, I can't solve this. If I just had an x squared and no x, I could solve it like a normal equation and square root at the end. And obviously, if I just had an x, I could solve that. But this whole thing equals 0. So the only way that I know how to solve this right now, from what we've covered, is to use your quadratic formula. So a is 1, b is negative 7, and c is 12. And we're plugging into the equation negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So negative 7 becomes positive 7. And then b squared, negative 7 squared is 49 minus 4 times 1 times 12. All right, so 4 times 1 is 4 times 12 is 48. So this whole thing is going to be 48. And 49 minus 48 is going to be square root of 1. And the square root of 1 is just 1. So this whole part right here is going to become 1. So it's 7 plus or minus 1 over 2 times a, which is just 2. So we got to do it two different ways. 7 plus 1 over 2, 7 minus 1 over 2. So it's 8 divided by 2, which is 4. 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So my answers here is x equals 3 or x equals 4. All right, we're going to do it similarly here for number 12. So first thing we need to do, distribute the negative. So it's negative 4g, negative 6g. Combine some like terms. This is the only squared. So for number 12, I'm going to have 5g squared, a positive 4g, and a negative 4g. Those are going to cancel out. I'm looking at this wrong, aren't I? Going too fast. All right, so let's start over here. When I distributed that negative, I lost that squared there for a second, but I noticed I had this g here, and I was like, why would I have two g's next to each other? That doesn't make sense. So this one is a squared. So 5g squared minus 4g squared is just g squared. 5 minus 4 is 1. Positive 4g, negative 6g, that's negative 2g. And then that negative 35 doesn't have anything to combine with, so it's going to stay separate. All right, looking at this equation, I can't solve it without my quadratic formula. So a is 1, b is negative 2, and c is negative 35. Here's your quadratic formula. So negative 2. It's negative b, which is negative 2. So negative 2 becomes positive 2. And then negative 2 squared, that's 4 minus 4 times 1 times negative 35. So with all of this under here, you're going to have 4 minus 4 times 1 times negative 35. That's going to be 140. Let's make sure. And in fact, you could just put all of this in at once. So let's just do that. 4 minus 4 times 1 times negative 35. So you're going to get negative 140, or I'm sorry, positive 144. So it's 2 plus or minus square root of 144. Now I already know that's a really nice number. It's 12. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to that. So it's 12 that goes in this spot. 2 times a, 2 times 1 is just 2. And so I'm all set to go and finish this off now. So I have 2 plus 12 divided by 2, 2 minus 12 divided by 2. So I'm going to get 14 over 2, which is 7. And I'm going to get negative 10 over 2, which is negative 5. So my two answers are 7 and negative 5. And it doesn't matter which order you write that in. All right, 13. If I combine all of these, what do I get? So you can see they've given you some different choices here. So some people recognize when you do combine things that are like terms, you add the coefficients, right? So it'd be a 1 plus 1 plus 1, and you'd get the 3. But you see, that's not what we do with exponents. The only time we add exponents is when we're multiplying. These are not like terms. We can't put them together at all. So this is wrong. Here you see they've just put the 3 and the 7 together, but they haven't even done anything with this. So this is wrong no matter how you look at it. Here they've actually like multiplied 3 and 7, not quite sure. Truth is, you can't actually add any of these together. These are not like terms. Once you have a different exponent, you cannot put them together. These would stay separate. You can't simplify them down into one. So the answer here is D, none of these. Right, and then these just kind of working backwards, figure out what terms are missing here. So we went from a 53 to a 60. That means we added 7. 53 plus 7 would give me the 60 j squared. I went from a 7j to a 7j, which means there's nothing here that's going to combine with this because otherwise I wouldn't get the same thing. So this is really plus 0, which I don't have to write. And negative 21 became negative 30. So I'd have to add another negative 9 to get down to that. So minus 9. That gets a little trickier here when you have the minus sign. So let's be careful. 72 became 62. So it went down. So that helps with the minus. Okay, so it just went down 10. So I'm just going to put the 10 here. I'm not going to put minus 10 because the minus is already here. It's already minusing. So I don't want to add another minus sign because if you do minus a negative, that actually adds. We don't want that. Here, the 16k squareds haven't changed, so I don't need a term here. I didn't add anything or subtract anything from that. My k's went from a negative 6 to a negative 13. So it went down 7. The minus is already helping me go down. So this is going to be a plus 7k because it's really a minus. And 5 became 2, so it went down 3. The minus is already the down part. And there's the 3. All right, next part of the assignment is in the textbook. All right. So we have 14 to 21 here. Some of these we can just do kind of right in our head here. So these are being added together. You're just combining like terms. All right, so that's going to be a 6y squared. With my regular y's, again, it's a plus, so I'm just combining like terms. 13 minus 3, that's a positive 10y. And a negative 14 and a negative 24 combine to make a negative 38. No real work to show there. This one does. We got to distribute. So here's what we start with. So we got to distribute here. That's going to be a 66n. It's going to be a 48n squared and a negative 12. And then this all just comes down because it's a plus. All right, now I got to start combining my like terms. I'm going to start with the squareds here so they're in the right order. 48 and 6 is 54n squared. All right, those are gone. Then I've got the n's. It's a 66 minus a 1, so positive 65n, and a negative 12 and a negative 9. That's negative 21. All right, this one, the first polynomial is fine, no distributing, but the second one we do have to distribute a 4. Okay, so This is going to get distributed. This is going to come straight down. So that's going to be a negative 28w squared. And 4 times 15 is positive 60, but it's a negative 4. So negative 4 times that, negative 60. All right, I have a 7 and a negative 28. That's negative 21w squared. Got a negative 2w with nothing else to combine it with. So it's going to stay a minus 2w. And then positive 16 combines with negative 60, and that's negative 44. 17. All right, and this one, we do need to distribute just the negative. So I'm going to go ahead and just write the first one down. And now I'm going to go ahead and just, because this is only multiplying by a negative, I'm just going to go ahead and translate it. So it's going to be a minus 2x. It's going to be a negative times a negative, so a positive 5x to the third, negative times a positive, so a negative 6. Okay, here's a x to the third and x to the third. That's a 1 and a 5, so 6x to the third. This is the only squared, so it stays 2x squared. This is the only x, it stays minus 2x. 8 and negative 6 is positive 2. All right, as we move into this next bunch here, this is where we're going to have to solve some equations, so it's going to be a little more work. So on 18, first thing I do is combine these, and it's going to equal 0, and then I'll deal with it after that. So I'm just going to do that in one step here. So 3x squared and 3x squared is 6x squared. 2x and 11x is 13x. And 4 and 2 is 6. And again, the reason I can just combine it like that is because there's a plus sign. When we get to the next one with the negative, we got to be a little more careful. So I have an equation equal to 0 with an x squared and an x. I got to go to quadratic formula now. So a is 6, b is 13, c is also 6. So negative b, that would be negative 13. 13 squared is 169 minus 4 times 6 times 6. And then it's 2 times 6. So this is going to become 12 down here. Let's go ahead and figure out that whole top part. So 169 minus 4 times 6 is 25. Okay, and the square root of 25 is 5. So I'm going to have negative 13 plus or minus 5 over 12. Negative 13 plus 5 over 12. Negative 13 minus 5 over 12. If you check the answer key, you see they leave them as fractions. So that's telling me if I divide, I'm going to get some decimals that I don't want. So this one here, negative 13 plus 5, that's negative 8 over 12, which you could simplify. Remember, you can always simplify in your calculator too. 8 over 12, put the fraction in, hit enter. That's where the negative 2/3 comes from on your answer key. Remember, you could have done negative 8 divided by 12, and you'd get this, which is going to be the same thing as negative 2 divided by 3. So there's your negative 2/3 and negative 8/12. Those are equal to each other. So you could always test it like that. But this is not a good answer for us. That's why they leave it as a fraction. And over here, we're going to get negative 18 over 12. Those would both simplify by 6, and you get negative 3 over 2. Again, you could do it in your calculator. So those are your two answers. Okay, 19. I'm going to go ahead and translate as I write this down here. So 3x squared plus 2x plus 4. And then everything gets distributed as a negative. Now look, they're all positives. So when I distribute this negative 1, they're all going to become negatives. So negative 3x squared, negative 11x, negative 2. Combine some like terms here. Well, a 3x squared and a negative 3x squared cancel. So they're gone. So I'm actually going to have an equation here that doesn't require a quadratic formula because the squared is gone. So a 2x minus 11x is negative 9x. 4 and negative 2 is positive 2. So at this point, don't start doing quadratic formula. I mean, you could. It'll work, but you're going to be plugging in a 0 for a, and that might mess you up a little bit. And it's more work than you need. We know how to solve this. This is a regular old equation. Just get x by itself. So minus 2 divide by negative 9. 2 negatives make a positive. Final answer, just leave it as 2/9, and you're done. Okay, so don't get wrapped up in we always use quadratic formula, but that's only when we have an x squared and an x. That's the only way we can solve it. If we just have an x, or if we just have an x squared, we can solve with just our regular old equation work. All right, number 20. Finding the missing piece. So we went from 91 to 110. So you would just, if you can't do that in your head, subtract those two and figure out how much is left over. That's how much was added right there. So that's 19x squared. Because if I added 91x squared and 19x squared in the blank, I get this. The 4x, it disappeared, which means it canceled out, which means there was a negative 4x to get rid of it. And then I went from negative 15 to 62. So first of all, I'd have to add 15 just to get to 0, and then another 62 to get here. So 15 and then 62, that's 77 total. In 21. All right, this can be a little tricky now with the minus there. So first of all, we went from 3 to negative 4. We went down 7. So this is already telling me the down. So 7y squared. Went from negative 2 to negative 6. We went down 4. I already have the down, so I don't need a negative. Just the 4y. And negative 1 now became positive 21. This one went up. So since I have a negative here, I'm going to put another negative. Those two negatives make it go up. And it didn't go up 20. That would be from positive 1. Go from 1 to 0. Negative 1 to 0, that's 1. Then up another 21. So it went up 22 total.